What is the importance of recognizing and restoring Jesus Christ's African heritage? The story of Jesus Christ transcends borders, languages, and eras. His teachings have shaped entire civilizations, inspired billions, and continue to provide comfort and hope to countless people. Yet, one vital part of Jesus' identity has often been overlooked or erased: his African heritage. For centuries, Western cultures have portrayed Jesus as a fair-skinned, blue-eyed figure in religious art and imagery. However, this depiction is far removed from the historical and geographical reality of who Jesus was. The notion that Jesus may have had African lineage is not new, but it has been buried beneath centuries of cultural and theological suppression. To question the common portrayal of Jesus as a white man is to challenge long-held beliefs. But to ignore the possibility of a black Jesus is to erase a crucial aspect of the story, a story that has the power to reshape how we think about race identity and faith in today's world. In a time where conversations about racial justice, identity, and inclusion are more important than ever, rediscovering the African identity of Jesus holds profound significance. What does it mean for this part of Jesus' identity to have been forgotten, and why is its restoration so vital today? To find the answers, we must explore early historical records, confront the deliberate erasure of this narrative, and recognize the pressing need to reclaim this truth. If you're moved by these questions and eager to learn more, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content, and don't forget to leave your thoughts and comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Tracing the African roots of Jesus and rediscovering a forgotten legacy involves uncovering the forgotten story of a black Jesus by first examining the historical and biblical records that point to his African connections. Born in Bethlehem in Roman-occupied Judea, Jesus was a Middle Eastern Jew with roots in a region that connected three continents: Africa, Asia, and Europe. Judea's location at the crossroads of these lands made it a melting pot of cultures and peoples. In ancient times, racial categories, as we know them today, didn't exist in such rigid forms. The ancient world embraced a broader understanding of ethnic diversity, and this context of cultural exchange allows us to explore Jesus' connections to Africa more deeply. One of the clearest links to Africa in Jesus' life comes from the Gospel of Matthew, where his family fled to Egypt to escape King Herod's deadly decree. After being warned in a dream, Joseph took Mary and the infant Jesus to Egypt for safety. Egypt, a North African country, had long been a place of refuge for the Jewish people, especially during times of persecution, such as the Babylonian exile. This flight to Egypt not only marks a pivotal moment in Jesus' early life, but also symbolizes his family's deep connection to the African continent. It is no coincidence that Africa was a place of safety and salvation for Jesus, continuing a long tradition of African lands offering refuge in times of need. Jesus' family's escape to Egypt indicates that Egypt was a land populated by dark-skinned people of African descent, and the fact that Mary, Joseph, and Jesus blended into the society suggests that they shared similar physical traits. If they had looked significantly different from the locals, they likely would have drawn unwanted attention. This detail hints that Jesus and his family likely had more African features than the whitewashed images commonly portrayed in Western art. Early Christian art and iconography in Africa further support this African connection. In places like Egypt and Ethiopia, ancient depictions of Jesus show him with dark skin, woolly hair, and distinctly African facial features, reflecting a more authentic and diverse representation of his heritage. The Coptic Christians of Egypt, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, have consistently portrayed Jesus in ways that mirror their own ethnic identity and cultural context. These representations are not merely artistic choices, but are deeply rooted in the community's understanding of Jesus as a figure who embodies their own experiences and heritage. The Coptic tradition, with its rich history dating back to the early centuries of Christianity, has preserved these depictions through intricate frescoes, mosaics, and icons that emphasize Jesus' connection to the African continent. These representations weren't limited to Egypt alone. In Ethiopia, where Christianity dates back to the 4th century following the conversion of King Ezana of Aksum, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, a deeply historical and vibrant Christian tradition, maintains to this day that Jesus had African ancestry. This belief is not only a theological stance, but also a cultural affirmation that has profoundly shaped the faith and identity of Ethiopian Christians for centuries. The The Ethiopian Orthodox Church integrates local traditions, languages, and artistic styles into its worship and religious expressions, resulting in images of Jesus that resonate deeply with the Ethiopian people. These depictions offer a powerful image of a Jesus who represents them, reinforcing their sense of belonging and spiritual connection. Another important African figure in Jesus' life is Simon of Cyrene, who, according to the Gospels, helped Jesus carry his cross on the way to the crucifixion. Simon was from Cyrene, a city in modern-day Libya, North Africa, and he was likely a dark-skinned African man present in Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. His role in assisting Jesus in his final moments highlights the deep ties between African and Jewish communities during this time. Simon's presence in such a pivotal moment serves as a reminder of the African influence on the story of Jesus and underscores the interconnectedness of different cultures and peoples in the ancient world. This act of solidarity not only humanizes Jesus, but also emphasizes the universal nature of his message, transcending ethnic and cultural boundaries. While these accounts may not offer definitive proof of Jesus' African heritage, they significantly challenge the long-standing portrayal of a white Jesus that has dominated Western culture for centuries. From Renaissance art to modern media, depictions of Jesus have often reflected European ideals, erasing the ethnic diversity that surrounded his life. These images of a fair-skinned, blue-eyed Jesus align with European colonial ambitions, reinforcing a narrative of Christian superiority and white dominance. This Eurocentric portrayal was not merely an artistic trend, but served specific social and political functions, legitimizing European dominance and marginalizing non-European identities within the Christian narrative. This version of Jesus, however, is far removed from the historical reality of his life. Despite centuries of suppression, the idea of a black Jesus has not been lost across Africa and among people of African descent. The understanding of Jesus' African roots has endured through oral traditions, local art, and community practices, maintaining a connection to a more authentic and inclusive portrayal of Jesus. For many African and African-descended Christians, Jesus is not just a symbol of divine love and sacrifice, but also a reflection of their own ethnic and cultural identity. This duality enriches their faith, allowing them to see Jesus as both a universal savior and a relatable figure who shares their heritage and struggles. The historical and spiritual ties between Africa and the life of Jesus are celebrated in African Christian traditions, art, and theology, reminding us that Jesus' story is deeply intertwined with Africa's rich heritage. African Christian art, for instance, often incorporates traditional motifs, vibrant colors, and indigenous symbols, creating a unique visual language that speaks to the African experience. These artistic expressions serve as a form of cultural preservation and spiritual affirmation, ensuring that the African identity of Jesus remains visible and respected within the broader Christian community. Moreover, African theologians and scholars have contributed significantly to the reinterpretation of Jesus' identity, emphasizing his connection to Africa and challenging the dominant Eurocentric narratives. They argue that recognizing Jesus' African heritage is essential for a more accurate and inclusive understanding of his life and teachings. This perspective not only honors the historical and cultural context of Jesus, but also empowers African and African-descended Christians by affirming their place within the Christian story. In addition to artistic and theological efforts, the celebration of Jesus' African identity is also evident in various liturgical practices and community rituals. In many African churches, songs, prayers, and sermons incorporate references to Africa and its influence on Christianity, fostering a sense of pride and belonging among believers. These practices highlight the integral role that Africa has played in the development and spread of Christianity, countering the narrative that Christianity is solely a Western religion. Furthermore, the global recognition of the African roots of Jesus is gaining traction as more people become aware of the historical and cultural evidence supporting this perspective. Conferences, seminars, and academic research dedicated to exploring Jesus' African heritage are becoming more common, providing platforms for scholars, theologians, and believers to share their insights and discoveries. This growing body of work helps to educate and inspire a broader audience, promoting a more inclusive and diverse understanding of Jesus that transcends traditional racial and cultural boundaries. The enduring legacy of African depictions of Jesus also serves as a source of inspiration for contemporary Christian movements advocating for racial justice and equality. By embracing a black Jesus, These movements challenged the historical and ongoing racial biases within Christianity, advocating for a faith that is truly representative of all its followers. This reclamation of Jesus' African identity is not only a matter of historical accuracy, but also a powerful statement against the systemic racism that continues to affect societies worldwide. It underscores the necessity of aligning religious beliefs and practices with the values of justice, equality, and human dignity, fostering a more compassionate and inclusive faith community. In conclusion, the depictions of Jesus in Egypt and Ethiopia, along with the role of African figures like Simon of Cyrene, offer compelling evidence of Jesus' African heritage and challenge the dominant white portrayal in Western culture. These representations highlight the ethnic and cultural diversity that characterize Jesus' life and provide a more authentic and inclusive understanding of his identity. The enduring belief in Jesus' African roots among African and African-descended Christians underscores the importance of reclaiming this aspect of his story, promoting a vision of Christianity that honors and reflects the rich heritage of the African continent. As more people recognize and embrace the African identity of Jesus, it fosters a more equitable and just Christian faith that celebrates diversity and rejects the racial biases that have long shaped religious narratives. The deliberate erasure of a Black Jesus was not an accident. It was intentional, driven by a complex interplay of cultural, political, and theological forces. As Christianity spread through Europe in the early centuries, it became increasingly tied to imperial power and eventually to colonial expansion. European rulers, especially during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, sought to blend their political ambitions with religious authority by promoting an image of Jesus that reflected their own ethnicity and cultural norms. They found a way to consolidate their power and legitimize their authority. A white European-looking Jesus served this purpose perfectly. This portrayal reinforced the idea of European supremacy, reshaping the religious narrative to fit the social and political structures of the time. By presenting Jesus in a manner that mirrored the ruling classes, European leaders could assert their dominance, not only politically, but also spiritually, positioning themselves as divinely favored rulers. One of the key moments in this transformation occurred during the reign of Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. After his conversion to Christianity, Constantine declared it the official religion of the Roman Empire, merging political unity with spiritual power. The Council of Nicaea in 325 AD was pivotal in shaping Christian doctrines and standardizing Christian practices across the empire. It was during this period that the shift in Jesus' image toward European ideals began to take root. Artists influenced by Greco-Roman standards of beauty started portraying Jesus with fair skin, straight hair, and European facial features. This wasn't merely an artistic choice. It was a deliberate decision aligned with the cultural and political goals of the Roman Empire. A white Jesus became the face of European Christianity, a symbol that slowly but steadily erased its true Middle Eastern and African roots from the dominant narrative. As European colonialism spread, the white image of Jesus crossed the Atlantic to the Americas, where it became entrenched in the burgeoning Christian communities there. European colonizers used this image as a tool to justify their conquest and subjugation of indigenous and African peoples. A white Jesus symbolized divine authority, and this idea was used to rationalize the systemic oppression of non-white populations. Missionaries presented this whitewashed image to African and indigenous peoples, reinforcing racial hierarchies and promoting the idea that whiteness was synonymous with spiritual superiority. This deliberate whitewashing was further entrenched by theologians and church leaders who either ignored or actively downplayed the African connections in Jesus' life, ensuring that the Eurocentric portrayal remained dominant. By the time of the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, the image of a white Jesus had become so deeply embedded in Christian thought that any suggestion of a Black or African Jesus was dismissed as irrelevant or even heretical. The Reformation, while bringing significant changes to Christian practice and theology, did little to challenge the racialized image of Jesus. Instead, it often reinforced existing power structures by aligning Protestant ideals with emerging national and ethnic identities. This distortion of Jesus' identity had far-reaching consequences. What are the historical and cultural factors that contributed to the intentional erasure of a Black Jesus in Christian narratives? The deliberate erasure of a Black Jesus was not an accident. It was intentional, driven by a complex interplay of cultural, political, and theological forces. As Christianity spread through Europe in the early centuries, It became increasingly intertwined with imperial power and eventually colonial expansion. European rulers, especially during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, sought to blend their political ambitions with religious authority by promoting an image of Jesus that reflected their own ethnicity and cultural norms. They found a strategic way to consolidate their power and legitimize their authority. A white European-looking Jesus served this purpose perfectly. This portrayal reinforced the pervasive idea of European supremacy, reshaping the religious narrative to fit the social and political structures of the time. By presenting Jesus in a manner that mirrored the ruling classes, European leaders could assert their dominance not only politically but also spiritually, positioning themselves as divinely favored rulers and thereby justifying their control over non-European populations. One of the key moments in this transformation occurred during the reign of Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. After his conversion to Christianity, Constantine declared it the official religion of the Roman Empire, effectively merging political unity with spiritual power. The Council of Nicaea in 325 AD was pivotal in shaping Christian doctrines and standardizing Christian practices across the empire. It was during this period that the shift in Jesus' image toward European ideals began to take root. Artists influenced by Greco-Roman standards of beauty started portraying Jesus with fair skin, straight hair, and European facial features. This wasn't merely an artistic choice. It was a deliberate decision aligned with the cultural and political goals of the Roman Empire. A white Jesus became the face of European Christianity, a symbol that slowly but steadily erased its true Middle Eastern and African roots from the dominant narrative. As European colonialism spread, the white image of Jesus crossed the Atlantic to the Americas, where it became entrenched in the burgeoning Christian communities there. European colonizers used this image as a tool to justify their conquest and subjugation of indigenous and African peoples. A white Jesus symbolized divine authority, and this idea was used to rationalize the systemic oppression of non-white populations. Missionaries presented this whitewashed image to African and indigenous peoples, reinforcing racial hierarchies and promoting the notion that whiteness was synonymous with spiritual superiority. This deliberate whitewashing was further entrenched by theologians and church leaders who either ignored or actively downplayed the African connections in Jesus' life, ensuring that the Eurocentric portrayal remained dominant and unchallenged. By the time of the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, the image of a white Jesus had become so deeply embedded in Christian thought that any suggestion of a black or African Jesus was dismissed as irrelevant or even heretical. The Reformation, while bringing significant changes to Christian practice and theology, did little to challenge the racialized image of Jesus. Instead, it often reinforced existing power structures by aligning Protestant ideals with emerging national and ethnic identities. This distortion of Jesus' identity had far-reaching consequences. By portraying Jesus as a white European, Christians reinforced the belief that whiteness was linked to divinity and moral purity, while non-white people were marginalized and seen as inferior. This belief system became a cornerstone for justifying slavery, colonialism, and later racial segregation, as it provided a divine endorsement for the subjugation of non-white populations. The white Jesus became a powerful symbol of power and superiority, reinforcing systems of oppression that harmed African and indigenous peoples for centuries. Religious leaders and political rulers worked in tandem to maintain these racial hierarchies, using the image of a white Jesus to uphold social control and legitimize their authority. This collaboration ensured that the whitewashed image of Jesus was not only pervasive, but also deeply ingrained in the cultural and religious consciousness of societies influenced by European colonialism. Meanwhile, the African connections to Jesus, such as his family's flight to Egypt or the role of Simon of Cyrene, were downplayed or reinterpreted to fit a Eurocentric narrative that favored European dominance and marginalized African heritage. Over time, the idea that Jesus could have looked like the people of the Middle East or North Africa was overshadowed by European depictions that emphasized whiteness and European beauty standards. This distorted image not only reinforced racial divisions, but also reshaped the spiritual understanding of Christianity, making it appear as a religion inherently tied to European identity and supremacy. The implications of this historical erasure are profound and multifaceted. By promoting a white Jesus, the church helped create a worldview where non-white people were seen as inferior and less deserving of divine favor. This belief system became the foundation for racist ideologies that justified exploitation, slavery, colonialism, and later racial segregation, embedding systemic racism within the very fabric of Christian theology and practice. The image of a white Jesus supported the development of systems of oppression that dehumanized African, indigenous, and other non-European peoples, perpetuating a cycle of discrimination and inequality that spanned centuries. The deliberate erasure of a black Jesus also profoundly shaped Western Christianity's theology by aligning Jesus with European identity. The church suggested that whiteness was closer to godliness, pushing people of African descent to the margins of the religious narrative. This contributed to the long-standing dehumanization of non-white communities and justified policies that enforced racial inequality, embedding these biases deeply within the social and religious institutions of the time. Today, scholars and theologians are actively challenging this historical distortion by re-examining biblical texts, historical records, and early Christian art. They are working diligently to reclaim Jesus' African identity, recognizing that this effort is not just about correcting historical inaccuracies, but also about addressing the deep racial injustices that have been perpetuated in the name of Jesus for centuries. Restoring Jesus' African roots is a crucial step toward dismantling the harmful belief that divinity is tied to whiteness and promoting a more inclusive and just vision of Christian faith. For African and African-descended Christians, reclaiming the image of a black Jesus is a powerful act of empowerment. For too long, they have been disconnected from a version of Jesus that reflects their own racial and cultural identity. By recovering the African aspects of Jesus' life, they can reconnect with a version of their faith that honors their heritage and struggles. This reclamation is not only an act of historical justice, but also a profound reminder that Jesus' message of love, equality, and justice transcends race and culture. The struggle for racial justice today finds immense significance in the forgotten story of Black Jesus, especially in the fight for identity and equality. As the legacies of racism, colonialism, and white supremacy continue to shape societies around the globe, the image of a Black Jesus challenges deeply rooted ideas about power and privilege. Reclaiming this image offers a transformative opportunity to reimagine how religion can be a powerful force for healing, solidarity, and justice in a world still grappling with the enduring impacts of historical injustices. For many African Americans, the image of a white Jesus has been a profound source of pain and alienation. During the era of slavery, millions of Africans were forcibly converted to Christianity, not out of genuine concern for their spiritual well-being, but as a strategic means of control and subjugation. The portrayal of a white Jesus was intentionally used to embody their oppressor's religion, reinforcing the pervasive idea that whiteness was intrinsically linked to godliness, authority, and superiority. Enslaved Africans were expected to worship a deity who looked like their enslavers, creating a painful and contradictory dynamic between their faith and their lived experiences. This forced association undermined the message of liberation and salvation found in the Gospels, as the figure of Jesus was co-opted to symbolize white supremacy rather than genuine spiritual emancipation. Even after the abolition of slavery, the image of a white Jesus persisted in Black churches, significantly shaping how many African Americans related to their faith. This enduring portrayal created a profound disconnect between the liberating teachings of Jesus and the harsh realities of African Americans' lived experiences. Many found themselves grappling with how to reconcile their faith in a Savior who preached justice and liberation for the oppressed with a whitewashed figure that had been used to justify their own oppression. This dissonance sparked a powerful and necessary desire to reclaim Jesus in a way that resonated authentically with their own experiences and cultural identity. In recent years, the movement to reclaim a Black Jesus has gained substantial momentum. Theologians, pastors, and activists, particularly within movements like Black Lives Matter, emphasize the critical importance of a Black Jesus in affirming Black dignity and humanity in the face of systemic racism and pervasive violence. Black Jesus is not merely a historical figure. He stands as a potent and enduring symbol of resistance to oppression, embodying the struggles of the poor, marginalized, and oppressed communities. The life of Jesus, as narrated in the Gospels, mirrors the story of someone born into poverty, living under the harsh conditions of Roman occupation, and ultimately being executed for challenging entrenched injustices. For many African Americans and people of color, this narrative resonates deeply with their own experiences of racial oppression, police violence, and economic exploitation, creating a profound connection between their struggles and the life of Jesus. Moreover, the reclamation of Black Jesus serves as a catalyst for broader social and spiritual transformation. It invites believers to rethink traditional religious narratives and embrace a more inclusive and representative vision of their faith. This shift not only empowers African Americans and people of color by providing them with a relatable and affirming spiritual figure, but also challenges the broader Christian community to confront and dismantle the racial biases that have long been embedded within religious institutions and practices. By embracing a Black Jesus, communities are able to foster a deeper sense of solidarity and collective identity, reinforcing the principles of justice, equality, and compassion that lie at the heart of the Christian message. The movement to reclaim Black Jesus also intersects with various aspects of cultural and artistic expression. Contemporary African American art, music, and literature increasingly reflect this reimagined image of Jesus, portraying him in ways that highlight his connection to African heritage and the ongoing struggle for racial justice. These artistic endeavors serve as powerful tools for education and advocacy, raising awareness about the historical erasure of Jesus' African identity and promoting a more nuanced and truthful understanding of his legacy. Through these creative mediums, the story of Black Jesus is brought to life in vibrant and impactful ways, inspiring new generations to embrace a faith that is both deeply personal and socially engaged. Furthermore, theological discussions and academic research are playing a crucial role in supporting this reclamation effort. Scholars are delving into historical texts, biblical studies, and early Christian art to uncover evidence of Jesus' African connections and challenge the dominant Eurocentric portrayals that have prevailed for centuries. This scholarly work not only provides a more accurate historical context, but also reinforces the theological imperative to recognize and honor the full diversity of Jesus' identity. By engaging with these academic perspectives, believers are encouraged to adopt a more inclusive and comprehensive approach to their faith, one that acknowledges and celebrates the rich tapestry of human diversity. In addition to academic and artistic efforts, community-based initiatives are instrumental in promoting the image of Black Jesus. Churches, faith-based organizations, and grassroots movements are actively incorporating this reimagined image into their worship practices, educational programs, and social justice campaigns. These initiatives create spaces where individuals can explore and affirm their spiritual identity in ways that are both culturally relevant and deeply meaningful. By integrating the story of Black Jesus into their communal life, these groups foster a sense of empowerment and resilience, enabling members to draw strength from a spiritual narrative that aligns with their own experiences and aspirations for a just and equitable society. Moreover, the role of education cannot be overstated in this reclamation process. Educational institutions, both religious and secular, are beginning to include more diverse representations of Jesus in their curricula and teaching materials. This inclusion helps to broaden students' understanding of Jesus' historical and cultural context, promoting a more accurate and inclusive portrayal that acknowledges his African and Middle Eastern roots. By educating the younger generation about the diverse representations of Jesus, these institutions are helping to dismantle the entrenched Eurocentric narratives that have long dominated Christian education and worship. The global recognition and acceptance of Jesus' African roots are also gaining traction as more people become aware of the historical and cultural evidence supporting this perspective. International conferences, seminars, and interfaith dialogues dedicated to exploring Jesus' African heritage are providing platforms for scholars, theologians, and believers to share their insights and discoveries. These gatherings facilitate the exchange of ideas and foster a sense of global solidarity among those advocating for a more inclusive understanding of Jesus. This growing body of work helps to educate and inspire a broader audience, promoting a more inclusive and diverse understanding of Jesus that transcends traditional racial and cultural boundaries. As these conversations gain momentum, they contribute to a wider movement within Christianity that seeks to embrace and celebrate the full spectrum of human diversity. The enduring legacy of African depictions of Jesus also serves as a source of inspiration for contemporary Christian movements advocating for racial justice and equality. By embracing a Black Jesus, these movements challenge the historical and ongoing racial biases within Christianity, advocating for a faith that is truly representative of all its followers. This reclamation of Jesus' African identity is not only a matter of historical accuracy, but also a powerful statement against the systemic racism that continues to affect societies worldwide. It underscores the necessity of aligning religious beliefs and practices with the values of justice, equality, and human dignity, fostering a more compassionate and inclusive faith community. In addition, interfaith collaborations are emerging as key players in promoting the image of Black Jesus. Partnerships between different religious groups and movements are helping to amplify the message of inclusivity and justice, fostering mutual understanding and respect across diverse faith traditions. These collaborations highlight the universal principles of love, compassion, and justice that lie at the heart of many religious teachings, demonstrating that the image of Black Jesus can serve as a unifying symbol for various communities striving for a more equitable and just world. The media also plays a significant role in this reclamation effort. Documentaries, films, and television programs are increasingly featuring narratives that explore Jesus' African heritage, providing a platform for these alternative representations to reach a wider audience. These media portrayals help to challenge and dismantle the dominant whitewashed image of Jesus, offering viewers a more diverse and accurate depiction that resonates with their own cultural and racial identities. By bringing the story of Black Jesus to the forefront of popular culture, the media contributes to a broader societal shift towards recognizing and valuing diversity within religious narratives. Furthermore, the digital age has provided new opportunities for the promotion and dissemination of the image of Black Jesus. Social media platforms, online forums, and digital art communities are vibrant spaces where believers and activists can share their interpretations and representations of Jesus, fostering a global conversation about his true heritage. These digital communities facilitate the exchange of ideas and provide support for those advocating for a more inclusive and representative portrayal of Jesus, helping to amplify their voices and reach a global audience. The role of personal testimony and lived experience is also crucial in this reclamation process. Individuals who have experienced racial injustice and oppression often find solace and strength in identifying with a Black Jesus who embodies their struggles and aspirations. Personal stories of faith and resilience highlight the profound impact that a relatable and affirming spiritual figure can have on individuals and communities, reinforcing the importance of an inclusive and diverse representation of Jesus in fostering spiritual and social healing. In conclusion, the deliberate erasure of a Black Jesus was a calculated effort to reshape Christianity to align with European political and racial agendas. This process distorted the image of Jesus and contributed to the development of racist ideologies that have had lasting effects on both Christian theology and society at large. Reclaiming Jesus' African identity is a crucial step toward healing the racial divisions that have been perpetuated by this whitewashing. It challenges the long-standing association between whiteness and divinity, offering a more inclusive and accurate vision of Jesus for believers of all races and cultures. By acknowledging and restoring the true, diverse heritage of Jesus, Christianity can move towards a more just and equitable future, one that honors the rich cultural diversity of its followers and upholds the fundamental principles of love, equality, and justice that lie at the heart of its teachings. This reclamation effort not only corrects historical inaccuracies, but also serves as a powerful tool for social transformation. It encourages a re-examination of how religious symbols and narratives have been used to support and justify systems of oppression, urging a move towards a more compassionate and inclusive faith community. By embracing the image of a Black Jesus, Christianity can foster a deeper connection with marginalized and oppressed communities, promoting a faith that truly embodies the values of justice, equality, and human dignity. This transformation is essential for creating a more equitable and compassionate society, where all individuals, regardless of their racial or ethnic backgrounds, can see themselves reflected in the divine narrative and find inspiration in a spiritual figure that resonates with their own experiences and aspirations. Ultimately, the story of Black Jesus is not just a historical correction. It is a call to action for believers to align their faith with the principles of justice and equality. It is an invitation to embrace a more inclusive and representative vision of Christianity, one that honors the diversity of its followers and upholds the true essence of Jesus' message. By reclaiming the image of Black Jesus, communities can bridge the gap between spiritual teachings and social realities, fostering a faith that is both deeply personal and socially engaged. This reclamation holds the promise of creating a more just, equitable, and compassionate world, where the true essence of the Christian message is fully realized and celebrated by all. Churches, faith-based organizations, and grassroots movements are actively incorporating this reimagined image into their worship practices, educational programs, and social justice campaigns. These initiatives create spaces where individuals can explore and affirm their spiritual identity in ways that are both culturally relevant and deeply meaningful. By integrating the story of Black Jesus into their communal life, these groups foster a sense of empowerment and resilience, enabling members to draw strength from a spiritual narrative that aligns with their own experiences and aspirations for a just and equitable society. The global recognition and acceptance of Jesus' African roots are also gaining traction as more people become aware of the historical and cultural evidence supporting this perspective. International conferences, seminars, and interfaith dialogues dedicated to exploring Jesus' African heritage are providing platforms for scholars, theologians, and believers to share their insights and discoveries. This growing body of work helps to educate and inspire a broader audience, promoting a more inclusive and diverse understanding of Jesus that transcends traditional racial and cultural boundaries. As these conversations gain momentum, they contribute to a wider movement within Christianity that seeks to embrace and celebrate the full spectrum of human diversity. The enduring legacy of African depictions of Jesus also serves as a source of inspiration for contemporary Christian movements advocating for racial justice and equality. By embracing a Black Jesus, these movements challenge the historical and ongoing racial biases within Christianity, advocating for a faith that is truly representative of all its followers. This reclamation of Jesus' African identity is not only a matter of historical accuracy, but also a powerful statement against the systemic racism that continues to affect societies worldwide. It underscores the necessity of aligning religious beliefs and practices with the values of justice, equality, and human dignity, fostering a more compassionate and inclusive faith community. In conclusion, the struggle for racial justice today is deeply intertwined with the forgotten story of Black Jesus, highlighting the critical need to reclaim and honor his African heritage. This effort challenges long-standing racial biases within Christianity, offering a transformative vision of faith that emphasizes justice, equality, and solidarity with the oppressed. By embracing a Black Jesus, communities can bridge the gap between spiritual teachings and lived experiences, fostering a more inclusive and representative Christian faith. This reclamation not only empowers African Americans and people of color, but also invites the broader Christian community to engage in meaningful conversations about race, identity, and justice. As the movement to honor Black Jesus continues to grow, it holds the promise of creating a more just, equitable, and compassionate world, where the true essence of the Christian message is fully realized and celebrated by all. The image of a Black Jesus also critiques systemic racism and white supremacy within both religious and secular institutions. By reclaiming Jesus as a man of African descent, theologians and activists challenge the association between Christianity and whiteness that has dominated Western thought for centuries. In this sense, Black Jesus becomes a radical symbol of justice and equality, reminding us that God's love and liberation extend to all people, regardless of race or ethnicity. In contrast to the whitewashed depictions of Jesus that have long dominated churches and religious art, a Black Jesus calls us to reimagine Christianity as a faith that defends the oppressed and stands against all forms of racial and social injustice. This reclamation also impacts the broader conversation about race and identity within the church. Multiracial and African American congregations are rethinking traditional portrayals of Jesus, recognizing that these depictions are not neutral but reflect centuries of racial bias. By embracing a Black Jesus, these communities affirm their own identities and experiences while also challenging the narratives that have excluded them. This shift is part of a larger movement to reflect the global diversity of Christianity, acknowledging that Jesus' message transcends racial, cultural, and ethnic boundaries. Outside of religious institutions, a Black Jesus has become a potent symbol in the fight for racial justice. Movements like Black Lives Matter have drawn on the image of a Black Jesus as a figure who resists state-sanctioned violence and oppression in protests, speeches, and art. Black Jesus is invoked as a reminder that the fight for racial equality is not just a political battle, but a spiritual one. The parallels between Jesus' life and the lives of people of color facing injustice today are striking. Like Jesus, many are subjected to violence, dehumanization and oppression at the hands of the state. The story of Black Jesus also challenges Christians to confront how religion has been used to justify inequality. It asks believers to reflect on how they see Jesus and what those perceptions reveal about their views on race, power, and privilege. If Jesus is seen as a figure of divine authority who is white, what does that say about the ways white supremacy has shaped religious thought? But if Jesus is understood as a person of color oppressed by the political and religious authorities of his time, how might that change how we think about justice and inequality today? For those committed to racial justice, Black Jesus offers a hopeful vision of a world where all people are seen as equal in the eyes of God. He calls believers to a deeper understanding of the gospel, one that emphasizes solidarity with the marginalized. In this vision, Black Jesus is not just a historical figure, but a living symbol of God's commitment to justice, liberation, and human dignity. The relevance of Black Jesus today lies in how he challenges deeply ingrained ideas about race, identity, and justice in a world still shaped by the legacies of racism. Reclaiming Black Jesus is a powerful act of resistance, reminding us that the struggle for racial justice is both spiritual and political. Through this reclamation, theologians, activists, and believers are offering a new understanding of Christianity, one that centers the experiences of the oppressed and calls for a more just and inclusive world. Restoring the forgotten story of Black Jesus is a path to truth and justice. The story of Black Jesus is one that has been neglected, erased, and deliberately silenced for far too long. But now, as we confront the painful legacies of racism, colonialism, and white supremacy, this forgotten narrative demands to be brought back into the light. The image of Black Jesus, long overshadowed by whitewashed depictions, offers a profound reminder of the diversity and inclusiveness that lie at the heart of the Christian message. Restoring this story is not just an academic exercise. It is a spiritual and moral imperative in our ongoing pursuit of justice, equality, and truth. Reclaiming the story of Black Jesus means confronting a narrative that was intentionally marginalized, one that challenges centuries of Eurocentric dominance in art, theology, and culture. The whitewashing of Jesus was not simply a stylistic choice. It was a deliberate act linked to colonial and imperial power structures that sought to legitimize domination and oppression. Acknowledging the African roots of Jesus, his identity as a Middle Eastern Jew in a multicultural, ethnically diverse ancient world, becomes a radical act of truth-telling. It shakes the foundations of systems that have long perpetuated racial inequality. By restoring the image of Black Jesus, we do more than correct historical inaccuracies. We affirm the dignity and humanity of Black people both historically and today. Black Jesus stands as a symbol of resistance to oppression, living in solidarity with the marginalized, the poor, and the outcast. Recognizing his African heritage brings into sharp focus the deep connections between the Christian faith and the African continent, connections that have too often been erased by Western narratives. This reclamation forces us to confront the theological and cultural systems that have been used to justify racism. It asks Christians and people of faith to examine how their religious traditions have been co-opted to support inequality for centuries. The image of a white Jesus was weaponized to justify colonialism, slavery, and segregation, portraying whiteness as synonymous with divinity and authority. Restoring Black Jesus disrupts this false narrative and reclaims the liberating message at the heart of the gospel, a message that stands with the oppressed and calls for justice. Ultimately, the story of Black Jesus matters because it touches the core of what it means to be human. Jesus did not come for the powerful and privileged, but for the marginalized, the oppressed, and those cast aside by society. He lived as an outcast, was persecuted by the authorities, and stood with those denied their dignity and humanity. The story of Black Jesus is, at its essence, a story of liberation, one that challenges systems of power and offers hope to those who have been silenced. Remembering Black Jesus means remembering the fullness of a faith that has the power to heal, transform, and unite people across all boundaries of race and ethnicity. This act of remembrance is not just about correcting history. It is about reclaiming the true essence of Christianity, a vision of a just, inclusive, and loving world where all are seen as equal in the eyes of God. Black Jesus is not merely a figure from history. He is a symbol of the ongoing struggle for justice, a beacon of hope for the oppressed, and a reminder that dismantling racism is a sacred calling for all who believe in justice. As we seek to restore the story of Black Jesus, we must also recognize its broader implications for how we see ourselves and our world. This is not just about historical correction. It is about spiritual renewal, To remember Black Jesus is to remember the radical love, justice, and compassion he embodied. It is to embrace a faith that transcends racial, ethnic, and cultural divides, offering a vision of unity, healing, and reconciliation. In restoring the story of Black Jesus, we are not simply looking back. We are being invited to create a more just and equitable future for all.